So let's dive into this. So today's panel is dedicated to exploring strategies and approaches that empower students with the critical skills they need to thrive, not just in the classroom, but in life beyond school. Our panelists will share practical methods to develop students' critical thinking and problem-solving skills, techniques to amplify their voices and deepen their involvement in their learning journey, and approaches to creating inclusive, dynamic learning environments. We'll also dive into insights on enhancing student engagement and well-being, all while preparing them for future career readiness. And yes, we're going to do that in 45 minutes and then have 15 minutes for questions. But I'm confident we can do it. So together today, we're going to uncover how fostering these vital skills and creating inclusive spaces can really transform the educational experience, supporting students' academic, personal, and professional growth. So I am really pleased and thrilled to have such an experienced group of panelists with us today. And I know that you're going to leave inspired with actionable ideas to take back to your own classrooms and schools. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. So first, Lori Mayer is Associate Superintendent of Learning at Rocky View Skills in Alberta. Lori has been in this role with Rocky View for almost 4 years, coming to Alberta from a similar role in Saskatchewan. Lori's had the privilege of being a classroom teacher, school administrator, and registered psychologist, and she's in her 28th year in this amazing profession. So Lori has planned, implemented, and supported various teaching and inclusive learning programs, and she's really passionate about ensuring that all students have access to a high-quality total experience in Rocky View schools. Additionally, community work has been a vital part of Lori's career. She's partnered with numerous agencies to create and support programs that address the non-academic needs of children and their families. And up next, we have Jason Coupry. He joins us from Palliser School Division in Alberta, where he is Director of Learning. So Jason has worked in education for 24 years and counting, started out as a teacher, then principal, and now in division leadership with Palliser. Jason is also the co-director of the Southern Alberta Collegiate Institute, which designs career pathways for students in the areas of trade, agriculture, and health sciences. He's also chair of TAVE, Apprenticeship and Vocational Education, which is a provincial committee designed to heighten awareness of and parity of esteem for the trades and technologies. Jason's driven by helping students find their confidence and purpose through programs like career exploration, student leadership, and wellness. His enthusiasm for helping students discover their passion and potential is really contagious. And student success, both in school and beyond, is always top of mind. And rounding out the panel today is Candy Mackey. Candy is a dynamic bilingual educator with nearly 3 decades of experience in educational administration at Eastern Townships School Board, where she has served as teacher, principal, director of pedagogical services, assistant director general, and now director general. Since 2013, she has led the school board with a steadfast commitment to advancing student and adult learning, combining both pedagogical experience, expertise, a developmental approach, and an unwavering focus on building professional learning communities. Candy is skilled in data-driven decision-making. She leverages insights to address educational challenges, promote positive school environments, empowers educators to drive sustainable change in schools. She's known for a collaborative style. She's built strong partnerships with organizations to enhance student outcomes and ensure educational excellence. As Eastern Township School Board's change management facilitator, she's inspired by the work of Pierre Collerat. Candy is dedicated to fostering an inclusive, student-centered future for the school board. So I'm really pleased to have such an experienced group of panelists joining us. So let's get started. I wanted to kick off with a question for all of our panelists. And so what role does critical thinking play in enhancing student engagement, well-being, career readiness, and how can our educators balance these priorities? Perhaps I'll start with you, Jason.
How did I know that was going to happen? Great, I get to go first. Yeah. Well, I just want to say that it's an honor to be here and to be speaking with Lori and Candy. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity. So, in terms of the question, Ron Richard, who is the purveyor and author of Mindsets and Cultures of Thinking, states that learning is a consequence of thinking. And I mean, that seems rather obvious, but I don't know how often we ask kids to think in school. And so we have begun to ask ourselves that very simple question, very simple, but very complex and difficult question. What activities do we do throughout the day? How is our pedagogy, our teaching and learning? What is it doing to cause students to think as opposed to absorb and regurgitate and soak in? And I think that is why, and I'd be remiss if we didn't use our school survey data, given the crew today. We have 31% overall of our students from grades 7 through 12 are interested and motivated in school. And it's about 29% in our grade 11 and 12 years. And the students that value schooling outcomes, our average is 62, and it's almost like a sliding scale. So grade 7, it's higher, and it just gradually creeps down until you get to grade 12. That bothers me a lot. And you think about, I use this analogy all the time. If you think about a business that operated at a 30% satisfaction rate, I don't know how long that business would be in business for. And yet it seems to be acceptable. Those results are somewhat shameful if it weren't for the fact that that's essentially the Canadian norm. So what are we doing in education to engage students at a higher level and to have them critically think about their future and have them critically think in school? And so for us, that is the basis of, or the foundation of the problem that we're trying to solve or address at least. I have an amazing off-campus team that is part of that solution. And so we are trying to navigate through critical thinking by sort of setting students up for off-campus opportunities and asking them to critically think before and after. So we survey students. We ask them to think about how they think, what types of things they can do to bring value to an employer. Because our employers are telling us, and I just was in a meeting this morning with a foreman from a shop, an auto tech or an auto tech shop, and he said, "We love helping out students, but man, are they a lot. They don't know a lot." And he wasn't talking about turning wrenches and pulling apart engines. He was talking about just the fact they need to show up and how to act and how to learn and how to engage. And that's part of the frustration when we send them out into the world and they're not ready. If we don't ask them to think about how they think and how they act and how they manage their time and how the resilience they need to show up and those types of things. So that's one of the things that we've taken on. And so one of the things that we found success with in this sort of programmatic state is we've stopped asking students what they're going to do after high school. So what are you going to do next year? Or what are you going to do the year after? Because the students themselves, through the Our School Survey and other means, have told us, stop asking us that question. It stresses us out. We don't know for sure. And because we want to be polite young people, we'll always answer you, but we give you the answer we think you might want to hear, right? And all that does is create more uncertainty and stress. There's probably about, I would say, I've been, again, as you said in my bio, I've been doing this for 24 years. I did a lot of career counseling and when I was in high school. And invariably, I would say 20% of the kids are like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And 80% have no clue. Or they just don't know how to, I know I like certain things, but I don't know how to ladder that into a potential post-secondary life. So we've stopped asking that question. And so now we're asking the question, what are you curious about? What do you love to do? What do you love to learn? Because it could be anything. And if it's video games, that's fine. Like there's things you can do that might, be a potential career for you. So just that idea of the curiosity, we want you to what do you want to know more about? Because unfortunately, and I'm sure it's Canada-wide, I know it's Canada-wide, we have a curriculum we have to feed students and we have an obligation to do that. That is our job. But that doesn't mean it interests them, right? So how can we connect them to that curriculum or to a post-secondary or an off-campus opportunity that sort of ignites that love of something? right? And so just in terms of amplifying student voice as part of it, the students were also telling us things like, hey, we want to do more hands-on and experiential learning activities. In one case, we had a fire department show up to one of our high schools and had the jaws of life, and they had a compressed car, and it was a super cool activity for kids. So the kids themselves came to me and the fire department in the local town and said, we want more of this. So how do you deny that? So now we're about 6 years running on a fire academy and emergency services. So kids do medical first responder, they do fire training. So by the time they graduate high school, they're registered firefighters internationally. That program wouldn't have happened without students and without, of course, the partnership with the town they're in. But that was driven by student interest, and it's on Friday afternoons. And how many kids miss? Zero. Right? It's their own time. We've told them basketball does not take precedence, all those other things. This has to be from 1:30 till 5:30 every Friday. You need to be here. And we don't have kids miss that type of opportunity because they're so invested and they want to learn so desperately, right? So anyways, that's just one example. We have others, of course, but yeah, so that's kind of the idea, is that experiential learning piece, having them sort of tell people what they want to do and giving them that agency to drive their learning. Within Palliser, we have about 165 dual credit courses, so students can take dual credit in an area that interests them, and we find that valuable in the sense that they get to both choose what they're interested in and maybe see if they want to continue to pursue it, or just as valuable, they may say, oh my gosh, I thought I wanted to be in psychology and I certainly don't because I did not enjoy that. They get to do that in high school, so they don't have to worry about that afterwards or spending a lot of money or time and investment. In terms of the well-being, and I know I probably should wrap up here because I've got notes, so you're not here till Sunday just listening to me. Anyway, sorry. In terms of the well-being piece, all of that being said, when we have kids that find a purpose, when they don't do well inside the traditional classroom, and this is not exclusive of the traditional classroom, we say this is an extension of the wonderful teaching and learning that goes on in Palliser. So it's not an us versus them piece. But some kids just don't do well. 70% of kids don't do very well inside the four walls of the classroom. So when we allow students to try these experiential off-campus learning opportunities, it starts to connect with their learning in the classroom, and it starts to give them a bigger sense of purpose. And I'm here at Lethbridge Polytechnic right now because we run collegiate programming here. And oftentimes we hear from students is, when I get my hands on tools, when I get to start doing something, I feel smart. And I don't feel smart in a classroom all the time. And so this is one of those opportunities where they figure out their purpose, and they see a brighter future. So that invariably helps our wellness as well. And that has borne itself out in the feedback we get from our students. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jason. I can really attest to that. When I was in BC about 15 years ago, the province had they promoted it as the third choice. So I built a I guess you would say a chef training program with the local community college. And we started our day at 7 in the morning. We did the breakfast program for the school. My kids ended at 2:30. When I was in Alberta, they do an excellent job with the dual credits. Again, built a cosmetology program. A lot of those kids that I wouldn't, skipped here and there because I also had an at-risk portfolio. I saw them. We were doing hairdressing. We were doing nails and all of those things. That was that carrot, because I love that. I don't necessarily feel, like you said, in those four walls, but when I'm out, experiencing that. So anyway, thank you for sharing that. Candy, did you want to follow up on that? On Jason's experience?
Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're seated. Can I just say ditto to what Jason said? No, but very similar in Quebec. So I'm in a small rural school board in southeastern part of Quebec, so Eastern Townships School Board. And in relation to that question, when you think of critical thinking, you're thinking of going beyond the memorizing facts and accepting information at face value. You're really in the questioning, reasoning, pulling together information to come with well-supported solutions, conclusions, and so forth. So it definitely enhances student engagement by fostering curiosity, encouraging students to ask questions, explore ideas, solve problems. And definitely that impact in terms of that sense of autonomy that we want to bring to our students and the purpose in their learning, et cetera, definitely has impact on their well-being. So we've noticed it as well, the Eastern Townships School Board. When Jason was mentioning his Our School survey results, for us, they're much higher at the elementary than the high school. And when we look at our high school, and we've been working at honing in on critical thinking skills. They're still, I know the Canadian is at 32%, but we're at 20%. So the high school is very much the heart of what we're working towards. And our elementaries are more in the 70%. So we're like, what happens between elementary and high school? So we really designed and took a look at the critical thinking. For us, when we're looking at the readiness, the career readiness, that aspect is really important as well. And so we have, in the Eastern Townships School Board in Quebec, we have work-oriented training paths. So a little bit like Jason was mentioning, that work-oriented, let's try to get them in that path very soon in their student careers, and also the path of vocational training. So for us, it's at the age of 15. We're really trying to influence our ministry to go towards 14 and younger. So we explore in the younger grades as well. But those are two key aspects for us. In terms of balancing these priorities, what we've done is we've included this whole intellectual engagement aspect in our, what we call our commitment to success plan. So it's our strategic plan. So that has been in our plan. It's one of our major 4 foundational pillars. So we've named that it's a priority. It's in our strategic plan. It's, you know, it's part of our, the direction we're heading in. And really what we're asking is our educators integrate critical thinking into daily learning. Easier said than done. Whenever there's opportunities for real world meaningful tasks, that's what we're working towards. But I think the key aspect is when we're intentional about it. And that's the aspect we're bringing forth. Let's be intentional in fostering critical thinking. We want to make sure that there's safe, inclusive environments for students to feel empowered, to express themselves, take risks, make mistakes, and so forth. So that was one big piece for us in terms of really putting it forward from the entire organization. So intellectual engagement is part of it. So that definitely critical thinking has enhances it. And so we also are working at it. So we've worked at it more at the elementary. We started the elementary and we see, you know, in terms of the data, but a lot more in terms of student voice. So the leadership committees that we have are really stepping up to demonstrate their leadership in terms of what's our voice, what is it we want as students, here's our input. And if I compare to, let's say, 15 years ago, their input was very minimal. Now, walk into schools and you're seeing that they're leading school assemblies, organizing events. Not in all our schools, we're working towards that, but we're seeing the impact in terms of our results on the sense of belonging. That's where we're seeing a lot. So it's increased significantly. Yes, engagement, yes, student voice, well-being, but their sense of belonging has really been impacted. So to the question, you know, is it, what role does it play? It's playing a really important role, and it's really benefiting across, you know, the engagement, well-being, and career readiness. We don't have evidence yet in terms of the career readiness, though. That's the aspect in terms of, but definitely in observations, we certainly see it that we're bringing them to a dynamic future in that manner. So that would be it for me for now.
Thanks, Candy. I know before, Lori, before the webinar started, we were talking about critical thinking and emotional resilience and, you know, what's that connection there, particularly for our students that face that academic or personal challenges. I was wondering if you'd touch on that a little for us.
Well, sure. I mean, I would say that our school results are very similar to what Jason and Candy mentioned. Yeah, again, ditto to everything that you folks just said. I had a chance to look through a bit of the recent PISA results that were just released. And it was interesting to me that when we think about critical thinking attitudes, like considering multiple perspectives before forming an opinion, that's how they phrase it, cooperation is the social emotional skill that's most closely correlated to critical thinking skills. And our Canadian 15-year-olds reported that more than half the time they think there's only one right answer. So attacking providing those problem solving skills, I think right from kindergarten, teaching them how to solve their own problems, allowing them to fail and try again, creating those safe, welcoming learning environments where that belonging is built up. We're building up their confidence and learning how to problem solve right from preschool age they experience the success and failure. They have to think critically about how they're going to do that. It builds up their emotional resilience. When we think about critical thinking, it promotes a growth mindset. And that supports that idea of resilience. Very simple things like allowing kids to solve their own problems. Sometimes we're really quick to rush in and solve their problems for them, and just letting them work through it. Approaches like class meetings and things like, even we have a lot of our teachers in our school division who are using a building thinking classrooms approach. And so I don't know if the results are going to play out in their math scores, but it certainly will play out in understanding how to cooperate, get along with others, work together, problem solving. We have lots of social learning projects that happen at our elementary schools. Some grants like A+ for Energy, where kids have to work together and solve the big problems of the world. And so when they have an opportunity to do that, I think it builds their confidence, which allows them to be more resilient when they have to face those academic or personal challenges that they're bound to face as they grow up. So I would really echo that whole idea about being curious that Jason mentioned. I think, Candy, you mentioned that too, with respect to what are some other ways that I could think about this, and building up those skills for them right from preschool age all the way through. Thanks.
No, that's great. Thank you, Lori. I notice they kind of do that sometimes with my nephews. Like they're working on something and I just want to rush in and solve it for them, and and it's being that patient. So I guess my follow-up to that would be what would you say for that beginning teacher is overwhelmed with classroom management, overwhelmed with all of those things, about how would they integrate that critical thinking and problem solving into their daily management of their classroom?
Are you coming back to me with that one?
I can go to it.
Oh.
Lori, Candy, Jason, whoever would like to jump in.
I would just say quickly that we take a PBIS approach in our school division.
Okay. Yeah.
And so all of our schools, all of our classrooms are engaged in the PBIS way of looking at things. And so they're building those skills, and they use the same language across the school. Everyone knows it. Parents use it. It's everywhere. So I think, that just allows that opportunity to take place on a consistent basis within the division.
Thanks. We've heard from a lot of our other clients that do link our school results to a PBIS model. That's anyone else? Or yeah, sure, Candy.
So I could, well, in thinking, what advice would I give, and thinking of our, our newer teachers coming in, I would say start small. Start small, open-ended questions, encouraging students to analyze and reflect. When we were talking about that intention, if you're looking for it, you might be more, you might have it more at the forefront. So just whenever you have opportunities for students to explore and solve real world problems collaboratively, you embark on them. The advice I'd also give is don't aim for perfection. Critical thinking develops gradually. And we've been working on this for years at the ETSB, and it actually just now feels like we're on the cusp of something. So it takes time. We're not aiming for perfection. We're always working towards developing critical thinking skills. And actually, I just want to share, like this year, we launched our school year with a keynote speaker who gave us a few tips. His focus was on the critical thinking classroom. And so I thought I'd share a few of those aspects, because our teachers walked away. We have about 800 teachers at the ETSB walked away with just a few tweaks. And so not overwhelmed at all, but tweaks to spark curiosity, bringing thinking that needs to be at the core of all the learning, and so forth. So first tip was vocabulary. Sometimes framing the answers as right or wrong, instead of going that way, is that answer right or wrong? Consider using terms like, is that answer, is there weak versus sound reasoning? Does that answer have sound reasoning to it? Explain why. Focus on whether the reasoning behind an answer is valid and thought-provoking. So we really want our students to remember concepts. So if they're thinking critically about them, greater chances that they're going to remember the concept. So our speaker also encouraged teachers to reflect deeply in regards to their questions. So how they tweak a question might have a very different impact on the outcome in terms of prompting deeper thinking. So instead of asking, what is the answer? Well, you could be asking, what's a reasonable answer? So the students are saying, okay, well, it's not that it's right or wrong. Is it reasonable? Is it, instead of simply asking, for a choice, you can say, well, why do you think this option is more plausible? So once again, getting students to justify their reasoning, thinking about it, and so forth. And I'd say the takeaway for many of our teachers when he invited them to reconsider the structure of their units. So when you're lesson planning, often we have a tendency of presenting all the information, the facts, and so forth. And towards the end, we bring in a big guiding question, or we're going to, move into a bigger task with all the knowledge. He suggests bring that question, that guiding question at the beginning of the unit. So intrigue students right away. And as they're learning new knowledge, ask them, would you reconsider that response you had a couple of days ago? And how would you reconsider? What would change now in terms of your response? So encouraging them to learn actively as they explore the content. So at the end of the day, we want our students to be problem managers so that they're not focused on the single solution, or on the process of problem solving. So that's where we're working towards. And the last piece of advice I would say is lean on your colleagues. If you're starting overwhelmed, lean on your colleagues for support and ideas. So we really, that collaborative approach in terms of support, I think is a big one. So start small, use real world context whenever possible, and collaborate with peers would be the advice that we would share.
Thanks, Candy. Jason, Lori, do you have any tips you'd like to share for those?
I would just, for me, we're just in the very early stages of creating a systemic approach to critical thinking and other core competencies and executive functioning skills. So, creating rubrics, that's what we're starting to do now, right? So what does an initiating or emerging critical thinker look like? What does an exemplary critical thinker look like, and everything in between? But giving teachers the opportunity to co-create those rubrics, I think, would be very helpful, right? In terms of helping, because when students see that and teachers see that, it sets the foundation for what you're attempting to do. And like Candy's pointed out, it helps you as a developing teacher, or even as a senior teacher, to think about the way you're asking questions and how you're eliciting the next step. I was just in a teacher's classroom the other day, a beginning teacher's classroom. And she's like, well, how'd you come up with that answer? And the answer, of course, was, I don't know. And then it kills the conversation after that, right? Well, tell me, I don't know. So the kid has already shut down because he's been given the opportunity to say, I have no clue, right? As opposed to the way you ask a question to get them to think a little more about how they arrived at the answer they arrived at. So just thinking about questioning skills and developing those rubrics so that there's a sort of common understanding of what critical thinking could look like.
Thanks, Jason. And I noticed, Allison, you shared a resource there in the chat. If anyone else would like to share resources, please do so as we work through this conversation today. Tips, that's, we're here to hear from these, panelists who have had this experience and are delving into these areas, but we'd also love to hear your ideas as well. So Jason, I think you probably already answered part of my next question that I was going to ask you, but I wanted to explore kind of the connection between critical thinking skills that they're developing in school and that career and future readiness. And so you were talking about, you stopped asking them, what are you going to do after high school? And so would you mind delving a little bit more into that for us?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to say, though, in terms of the system, I'll stand on my soapbox for just a little bit, and I'll only speak of Alberta because that's the only context I looked up. But I will say that we have a system set up for essentially 25% of our kids. And we have 25% of kids in Alberta that will go on to university, and yet university seems to be the common goal. In our rural areas in Alberta, it's 13% of kids go to university, right? In the metropolitan areas, where Lori and I are both located, I guess here, it's about 33%. And so the system is designed for those kids. And so again, it almost marries perfectly with our checked out kids, because if they don't feel that university is right for them, then what's the point, right? If that's the way the system is sort of pushing them, or that's what society sort of values, I guess, right? And so I think it's a bigger picture issue when we think about how do we involve those. And in Alberta, by the way, between college and university and trades, there's still about 57% of kids that don't go to any post-secondary education at all, right? And so how do we open up that world for them? And for us, the idea to critically think is to think about how many options do you have? Like, we are really trying to expose kids to the amount of options that are out there. There are so many things. Like I say, you're curious about something, we'll find something that you might be able to learn after high school, kind of deal, right? And that's sort of the challenge we take on, because I think right now it's very limited in the scope, and then that just it's defeatist in a way to a lot of kids that don't know what they want to do, as I said earlier, right? And I know that you mentioned like the project-based learning, the work integrated learning, those things where those critical thinking skills can sort of can take hold, and we can have real world problems, if you will, right? And experiential. I think those are extremely vital in terms of preparing students, because again, going back to what employers are telling us, because I work with a lot of employers on a regular, almost daily basis, it's the ability to adapt. We are training kids, and I think there is that stress out there. Everything you hear about AI and the jobs disappearing, all that stuff, that is what students are absorbing on a regular basis, right? So yes, jobs will disappear, and yes, machines will take over certain things. But how can you adapt? How can you help yourself by being willing to, no matter what you do, you can say, oh, I can do that, or I can figure out how this would work here. And so those are extremely important things that, again, open up a world as opposed to narrow it. And that's what we're trying to do. And the last thing I'll say about this in terms of just preparing kids to be career ready would be the idea that, and it was mentioned earlier, life is not linear. And there is this sort of idea that you're going to go to school to become a teacher, then you're going to teach for the rest of your life, and then you're going to retire. It's not linear. And so just that approach to helping kids, again, we don't say, what are you going to do after high school? What's your career readiness? We say, what's next? Because there could be 1,000 things after that, but what's next for you? And how exciting is that you get to learn about this, right? You have so much time in front of you. There's no hurry to get that 4-year degree or that 5-year post-secondary thing. There is just explore what you love to do and let it take you where it will. And again, I think that takes a lot of pressure off, and it just opens up the world. And so just the idea behind, because there is critical thinking in that, when you have to think about what you're good at, what you want to do, what you love to do. And you can think about it in an expansive way, as opposed to, well, I mean, what is Lori here in Alberta, what is 94% or something for nursing now? Because students don't know what else they want to do. So, well, nursing or teaching or, medicine, or, I mean, thousands of careers out there. So we're just trying to help kids with that. So.
No, I think that's so important, and it's reframing that dialogue and bringing your whole school community together. So, you're approaching it with that mindset. I think when I started 27 years ago in education, it was in the next 5 years, we're going to have a mass retirement of teachers, and there's going to be lots of jobs, and I think they're still saying that, and saying you're going to have 5 careers throughout your lifetime that you're going to move through, and these these bits, and it's got to be hard for our kiddos these days when we say to them, well, this job may not be here in 10 years because of technically, it's got to be hard. Lori, anything you want to add to that conversation?
Sure. I mean, I would just say, like, you just nailed it right there as the rationale around the idea of having good critical thinking and problem solving skills. Because what you're training for and what you're doing right now is going to shift and change so many times over the average person's working career, that they have to have those skills. And I think, we have in our division plan, we have a goal called building future ready students. And our school data has been a huge eye opener for, first of all, the number of kids who think that they're going to graduate. It's like, what? How can you be in grade 7 and wonder if you're going to graduate? And then those who plan to attend post-secondary or trades. And so we're really focusing in through our work around building future ready students, and the Alberta student competencies are part of that, because we believe strongly that having those critical thinking skills and problem solving skills is what's going to lead to a future ready student. So, I mean, we're seeing things like we're trying to make it more evident for teachers how easy it can be. We've got a career practice guide that we're going to be releasing in the next couple of months. I can't take any credit for that. Sandy McDuffie's been leading that, but we're really trying to encourage more community connections for all of our students. It doesn't matter if it has to do with going to post-secondary or not. It's just who's in your community that's a helpful person to you. We're asking teachers to be just more purposeful and thoughtful about things. So, you know, for example, in a biology class, they're working on a project or a problem, and then the teacher brings in the idea of like, how would a medical researcher analyze this data? What would that look like through that lens? Or in a, you know, in a social studies class, what makes a what would an economic approach, what would an economist look at through this lens? And that's pretty high level, but even things like we have career word walls popping up in our high schools. So in a course, an ELA course, through all of the things that they're studying, the teacher is adding to the word wall things that are career related, just to get students thinking about the purpose of what they're doing and how that's all connected. Just asking to be more explicit in making instructional connections to careers all through the grades, not just at high school. We have to start earlier because they're showing us through some of our school data that even in middle school, they don't understand why they're doing any of this. So we need to make it more explicit for them. And it has so much momentum right now. It's very exciting in our school division, how enthusiastic people are, because it's very future oriented. And because of what we've been through over the last few years, we can get mired in that negativity. And I think this is a really positive, future oriented approach. So there's a lot of energy in our school division right now around careers and trades and making those explicit connections. Thanks.
No, thank you. So I want to delve deeper into one area that you've mentioned, and that is that area of student voice. And we know as educators, so I think we've all seen it in our classrooms, in our schools, when students take ownership of their learning, they're more likely to be engaged. I think Jason, you kicked us off with that mindset at the beginning there, and they're also able to consider multiple perspectives. They approach things with curiosity and more confidence. And so I would like to know specifically how each of you have encouraged in your schools really approaches to amplify that student voice. And anyone can start. I won't pick.
I guess I can go. So I'm just going to share some experiences in terms, like, we don't have, in terms of expertise, it's more in terms of experiences, things we've tried, and what's coming across that's seems to work well. But really what we're working towards in our school board is having educators create opportunities for students to share their opinions and ideas. So it could be, small group discussions, class discussions, project planning, student-led conferences, etc. But also to bring our students to set their personal learning goals, get them involved and empower them more in terms of their own learning. So offering them choice to demonstrate their understanding so that they take an active role in their own education. So some of our schools now are embracing the Universal Design for Learning approach, so UDL. So that whole aspect of accessibility and inclusivity that we offer students multiple ways to engage, express, and take ownership. So that is in the works in our schools. So I wouldn't say, throughout the school board, but it's definitely an effort to empower students to have that voice. We've also, and I mentioned, in our strategic plan that we've identified intellectual engagement as a key pillar for us. From that statement, we have established a Central Student Advisory Committee. So we've had this committee for about 10 years now. And initially it was high school and adult sector students. So we've extended it just this year. So it's really very recent to the elementary sector. And what we've discovered with this body of students, and it's at the school board level, is that they've been instrumental actually in shaping some key orientations in our school board in the last 10 years. So for example, when we were asking input on various topics, and when we talked about their second language, we were doing a data dive with our students, and we were saying, wow, look at the languages, how well we're doing. And we were looking at our second language, success rates were in the 90% and above, trend data we were looking at. But students were saying, yes, but we're not quite, we're not confident. We're not comfortable speaking in our second language. And that was really an eye-opener for us. So that came from them. And with that information, we started looking at our, curriculum and our programs and so forth. And we were able to identify a program that has une approche actionnelle. So more in terms of a real world task approach for a program. So to help motivate our students, build their confidence, but in real scenarios. And actually, we're just starting now, it's in the last 2 years. So this was from their voice. So when we talk about amplifying their voice and they see that they're heard, so it really encourages us to continue that, that dialogue. We've also heard from our students, so we've shifted in terms of even our math approach. And actually, as I'm sitting here, we have 85 teachers who are sitting together from grade 5 to grade 8. So it's a transition between elementary and for us high school in terms of an approach that's more conceptual in terms of our math. And so making connections with the real world, applying the concepts and so forth. And this scenario we've delved into for quite a few years, 5 to 6 years for elementary. And I remember walking into a math classroom not that long ago, and you could hear the talk. You could see the difference and observe it and so forth. So that whole learning based on fostering their critical thinking and so forth is definitely being nurtured through these approaches. So we're hearing our students and moving that. So when we say their students' voices matter, they certainly do. And then in terms of, and I'm sitting in the high school today where we have a high school now, and 10, 15 years ago, this would not have occurred. But today, high school is exploring innovative approach that will amplify their student voice even more. So this is a high school who already, in terms of passions, they have passion blocks and they have people working together, but they're looking to see how can we take that to the next level where students are taking a lead in their own learning, designing their own learning. So it's an approach that is in, well, like I said, they're exploring, so we'll see, but it really is based on students having a voice in shaping their education. So we're really honing in on the high school because the data I mentioned earlier, it's a huge concern in terms of their motivation interest. And I would add that in terms of amplifying that student voice, we model a lot. So we model in terms of from the school board levels, from the district level, the importance of that student voice. Have you asked your students, what do they think about that? And for the first time last year in our province in Quebec, we host a, the Anglophone community hosts a conference for all the educators in our 9 English school boards. And for the first time, we had a student panel. And it left the audience really inspired with their thoughts and insights. And actually, some audience members were saying, were they prepped? And they weren't. They were not at all. They were the highlight of the conference. And it was sort of a aha moment for some educators saying, wow, I think we need to. So really in terms of that modeling aspect, we're intentional behind it. So we really ask those questions of our schools and centers. What do our students think? And if I think like 10 years ago, we would have asked in terms of what's our staff thinking? What are our parents thinking? What's the community thinking? I'm not sure we would have said, what are our students thinking? And that is a big piece of just having those conversations or helping us amplify their student voice.
Thanks, Candy. Yeah, I think I'm not sure why it has taken so long. That concept of student voice emerged in the 70s, and in the 90s we had the student agency. My colleague Joel and I, we just jumped into a session at the beginning of the week. It was a forum of group of students, and I was speaking to them about student voice, student agency, over on the continuum to shared decision making, just what you described that's happening in one of your schools. And that's so important. Jason and Lori, I want to give you a chance to respond.
Well, I know we're up against time, so I'll be very brief.
Yeah.
For me, just to build on what Candy said, when we survey our students when we attempt to do anything. I learned very early. I created this amazing engineering program that was going to be fantastic and every kid was going to want it, and not one showed up, not one signed up, right? Like, maybe I should ask them what they want. That would be important. And the example I used earlier with the Emergency Services Academy, the Fire Academy, whatever you want to call it, when kids said they wanted it and we created it for them, the amount of buy-in and engagement was through the roof. Like I'm talking, they were showing up they were doing bake sales because it was very expensive to start. As you can imagine, there's a lot of equipment and stuff to buy. They were working concessions at tournaments. And this is what the kids were doing. We didn't ask them to do it. They said, we will do it because we know it's expensive and we want it that badly. I guess the pitfall is if you ask for student voice and you don't act on it, that becomes that contributes to our 70% of students that are not engaged, right? So I would just ask questions in a way that you know that you can follow through, and that you can sort of meet kids where they're at in terms of what they desire within any school community, or in this case, the division. So I just say it's extremely important to listen, and to sit at the table with them and help them create what they want to learn. So.
Thanks, Jason. Lori, few last words.
Yeah, sure. I would just say quickly, like when we think about why we don't amplify voice, I think, we have still some traditional structures that are in place, and that whole idea of relinquishing control or sharing control and all of those kinds of things I think are important. One of the challenges that we're really facing in Rocky View, it's actually an opportunity, is we have a significant number of English as an additional language learners all across our school division now. And so we make assumptions about some of their skills with respect to public speaking and all of those kinds of things. So I think we need to ensure that we're setting up a welcoming environment for everybody, where there isn't fear of judgment, where students don't feel marginalized, where they have multiple ways of sharing their voice. So with their actual voice or through technology or other ways, because as Jason mentioned just a minute ago, if we ask them what we think and then we don't do anything about it, we lost our opportunity. So just really prioritizing giving student agency through a way that's safe and caring and respectful for all of the students, I think, is something that we need to really consider. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'd like to open it now to questions. Anyone, and I cannot see the chat, so I'm going to rely on my colleague Nikki or Thomas if there are any questions.
Not yet, Lorna.
Okay. Well, we have a few minutes here extra, so I could give you back the gift of time, which we know is always, we love that as educators. I'm sure that we will have plenty of follow-up. We will be sending this out, Nikki, to probably Monday, I believe, the recording of the webinar.
Actually, you know what, Lorna? I'm going to throw one out there.
Okay.
I'm just going to put my camera on so everyone can see my Christmas jumper. And I wanted to, this is something that is not prepped, so I'm hoping that people will engage. But I am assuming that there are probably some representatives from school districts out there who have a student committee or a student council in place. And I'd be interested to find out what responsibilities those councils have in the different districts, whether or not they have a chance to potentially look through our school data or look through data and make decisions from that. So there is an answer in the chat.
Well, yeah, sorry. And I was just going to say that we have it on, it's a little tricky, but we do have it on many systems or many levels in the system. We have the school-based, we have the division-based, like a superintendent's panel, a student panel. And then we have what's here called SAIL, which is the Southern Alberta Interscholastic Leaders. So we have about 4 or 5 school divisions that bring together leaders to talk about these types of things, again, to amplify student voice and to talk about what matters most. And a lot of times that comes through the leadership lens, but it does touch on things like, just those skills for career readiness. And like we said earlier, the adaptability to use the skills you've learned to be able to advocate for yourself and others, to be able to ladder that into a successful future, has paid a lot of dividends for sure.
Can I check the chat a second, because I did see somebody post something.
Yes, Cindy had a question there. Sorry, I just pulled it up, Nikki. If any of the panelists could offer ideas of how to involve parents in this work?
Well, maybe if I may, Lorna. So
Yeah.
so it hasn't been an intentional, I would say, direction in terms of amplifying the student voice and critical thinking and so forth. What we have done though is we have at our Central Parents Committee, we always bring back highlights in terms of the student voice. Whenever there's an opportunity to communicate with our parents, we often talk about our student voice, what they're bringing to the table and so forth. So it's more right now, we're more in terms of planting seeds. And then we haven't sat down to actually identify, okay, what's the next step to involve parents in here? But we're moving in, I'd say in the last year or so, in terms of student leadership. Our Essential Student Advisory Committee at the elementary levels bringing a little bit of a buzz because now we're transporting students to their feeder high schools. So I think with that aspect, that might be a next step, but it's still at the student level for now.
Lori or Jason, any tips for involving parents?
I
in
would say
this?
that we're still at the planting seeds level as well. The approach that we're taking is we're trying to solicit from our parents areas where they feel like they can contribute to the career conversations that we're having with students or future-oriented conversations. So asking mums and dads and grandmas and grandpas and whoever, what do you do for a living, and how might you bring that into our classroom? Lunch and learns we've got happening at a couple of high schools with respect to parents coming in and just meeting with whoever's interested, talking about what they do. We've got, we're working on building something called an immersive learning experience where kids through the course of a week have an opportunity to experience different careers. And that would involve a lot of parents. So again, going out to the parent community and asking, this is what we want to do in order to engage students in future-oriented thinking. And is there anything that you're willing to contribute as far as leading a session or helping out? So just really at the beginning stages of engaging parents in that work.
Yeah, and from our end, we do a lot of work with parent councils. And so either myself or my team will go out and we'll engage with parent councils to let them know about what's going on, what programs are available to their children. Quite often when we do get a chance to get in front of parents, the feedback we get is, where was this when I was in high school, right? So there is definitely, I think parents know that their kids are bored with school in a lot of cases, or checked out, or they're different learners now because of the speed at which information and video comes at them. So I think there's more a readiness, and there's less of a, well, it would work for me, so I want to work for them. I think people are starting to understand that gap has widened significantly. And so anything we do when it comes to any kind of career readiness preparation or dual credit or off-campus programs, we we get it out to parents as well. So we don't just do it to students. We send out all the information to parents as well. And I think we'll be up to about 200 dual credit learners this year. We started at about 2, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And the difference when we saw the explosion is when we really started involving parents, and then parents started to encourage their kids, like, why aren't you taking advantage of this? And we also, a lot of those dual credit or off-campus programs are sort of packaged as a scholarship opportunity for kids, right? Because it's an advance and they can transfer to other institutions and things like that. So there's a bit of a financial incentive as well. But I do think the parents truly want something unique for their kids. And so, yeah, as I say, we're still in the planting stage too, but when we've gotten to parents, it's usually been through school council or hosting events or things like that. So.
Yeah, it's pretty cool when that student comes out and, first year power engineering, and they've got those dual credits there. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. And I know, Thomas, you wanted to have a few minutes here at the end to wrap up and thank our panelists and thank all of our attendees for today. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, Thomas.
Thank you, Lorna. My apologies for some reason my webcam is not working, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Lori, Jason, Candy. Thank you so much once again for taking the time to join this community practice event, for sharing these amazing insights that you shared, for these amazing conversations. I would like to thank all our attendees as well. We at the Learning Bar, we consider ourselves really fortunate to be able to engage with educators like yourself And we hope that this is the first of many more to come. So once again, a big thank you for all of you, and happy Friday, everyone.